We have a family cabin in the middle of nowhere, on a small lake with two other cabins surrounded by forested area and flat lands. About 2 miles away from the cabin, and across the dirt road, is a wildlife reserve. As kids, we walked through there all the time, and had the opposite of helicopter parents. After about 30 minutes of walking straight into these woods, there used to be a collection of abandoned houses, an old settlement, and we went exploring and found that the people who lived there had just up and left. In each house, there were still dishes on the table, clothing in the closets, and cars parked in the clearings, all the strappings for horses in the barns, and in one house, the floor had caved in, and there were about 40 pairs of women's shoes scattered around the hole in the middle. No bones though. Animal or human. Nothing. We decided to stay away from the second floor of the houses after we saw that. We figured that they'd be structurally unsound. A skeletal treehouse in the middle of the clearing. And after we told my parents, my dad wanted to come and look at it. In one of the houses we found a bedroom, fully intact. The sheets were still on the bed. The pillow still had the indentation of a head on it. But everything was covered in a thick layer of dirt and dust on the floors, and they had only our footprints in them. At the foot of the bed was this stunning enormous grey fur coat. There were a few moth holes chewed in it, and it was dirty as everything else was. But when we expected it, we knew it was real fur, likely wolf or silver fox. It was gorgeous. Dad decided he was going to bring it back and clean it up and see if he could have it remade for my mum, as my dad was a thrifty guy. As we were leaving, I got a chill on the back of my neck, and about 60 yards from the house, turned around and saw an old woman glaring at us from the windows of the second floor. She had her hair in a loose bun and was wearing a blue shawl over her shoulders, over a cream-colored blouse. I immediately felt super guilty. I grabbed my dad, who was about 10 yards ahead of me, and told him we'd better put the coat back, because the woman was still living there, and we had obviously probably scared her, and she looked pissed. We turned back around and I pointed to the window that I saw her glaring at us from. There was no one there. I said she must have gone downstairs, and as we approached the house still carrying the stupid coat, one of the windows in another house suddenly slammed shut. I ran as fast as I could into the woods. Dad, being Dad, stayed behind and started yelling for the lady to come out and that he was sorry. He went upstairs and no one was there. Dust on the floor undisturbed. Then he smarted up and dropped the coat in a big hurry, and we beat it back to the road as fast as we could. About 5 years later, the government demolished the whole thing. My parents have owned a cabin in the woods for a many number of years. I have some great memories out there. We'd always go there when me and my siblings were children. But as my parents got older and we moved away, the cabin fell into disrepair, and no one wanted to go there anymore. I had moved away from my family home and was, fortunately, situated a lot closer to the cabin than where my parents still lived. They weren't in a great financial position and asked me, as I wasn't too far away, if I could go down and check out how the old girl was doing, see if it needed any repairs and check out the condition, because they were probably going to sell it. I mean, they'd had their fill of it. It was time to pass it on to someone new, if they would take it anyway. Now keep in mind, we hadn't been there in a while. I'm thinking at least 4 to 5 years at this point, and still that's just speculation. as my parents said that they let it out to a friend, but they were never sure if they made it or not. Regardless, my parents mail me the key, and within a few days I find myself with it, and head on over there on Friday night. I pack a few things, thinking that I'll probably stay there the night, and just have a little chill time before heading back in the morning, and making sure that everything works fine. So, after about 2 hours of driving, I make it into a quite secluded area deep in the woods. It all looks very familiar, although much of the surrounding area has become overgrown. As I get out of my car, I step up onto the porch of the cabin. It's fallen into disrepair, that's for sure. There are holes, the wood seems weaker, and there's this strange, funky smell that I can't quite put my finger on. I go to put the key into the lock and give it a hard twist. Just as I try and push the door open, I realize that the expanding wood has made this a challenge, so I have to really shove and hear the wood creak from the door and the floorboards as I make my way in. When I finally manage to open the door enough, I close the door and get out my flashlight to investigate. I then realize something is wrong. The house is full of plastic bags, newspapers, and general garbage. I was beyond confused, and then the smell hit me. My God, did it reek? I was absolutely in shock that I quickly opened the door and nearly gagged. It took me 20 minutes before I braved going in there again. I assumed that an animal must have found its way in and died, and that someone must either have been living here or still was living here, or just decided to store a whole load of crap. Either way, I wasn't sure. But what kind of person would want to stay here, so remote, unless they had some transportation? Which, judging by no vehicle being outside, I really doubted. Not to mention the lock on the door still worked fine. So, after thinking all this stuff through, I opened the door once more. It was just as challenging the second time, and as I braced my nose and got my flashlight ready, I started out the investigation. You come in through the hallway, and to your left you have a bedroom. I stuck my flashlight in there, and it was very clear that the mess still flowed into this room. I exited, turned left to continue down the hallway, and entered the main living area, a sort of open plan kitchen and dining room. And that is where I saw it. My parents had an old couch that they didn't use anymore and that was just sitting in our basement. So one year we brought it here, and here it stayed. But there was something on the couch. It was definitely a person, or a person at some point. It now just looked like melted sludge over bone, black and festering. I can't begin to describe just how repulsed I was by this horrific sight. I gagged there and then. I could not hold it in any longer, and my vomit exploded onto a wall and erupted over the plastic bags. I had to leave straight away and tried calling the cops, but of course there was no service. I drove for about 15 minutes until I found decent reception and called, and they called the EMS and police. They took my statement and made it very clear that the person was very dead, which is something I could have figured out by myself. Long story short, I ended up having to clean up most of the mess, but at least the human remains, or if you can even call them that, were taken away. But my God, the stench permeated every bit of the wood. I never got much follow-up, and I don't know how long that body had been there, but long enough that it had absolutely destroyed the place. I ended up airing it for a week with no success. I bought fresheners and potpourri and those little liquid things with sticks that apparently make the house smell nice. Nothing worked. Once that smell permeates, it cannot be gotten rid of. I of course told my parents, who were beyond disappointed, and just thought that I would leave the windows open all year to see if that might do the trick. It's been about 4 months now, and I haven't gone back. But from all the pieces that I picked up once we cleared it up, it looks like it was some kind of homeless lady. She'd been living there for a few years and kept a tatty journal of what she did. Stuff like getting a lift into town or walking the 3 hours through the forest just to get back here. I'm not sure what she died of, but it's